everybody. Welcome aboard. What is this? Wednesday? As I'm recording this, I think it's Wednesday. The days just roll on by. When I started my journey into exploring FKR, looking into it, one of the books that was recommended to me a bunch of times was Mydwandr, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I reached out to the folks behind it a little while back, and they were kind enough to send me a digital copy on drive-through. So here it is. Hey, Calcalypse. Yes, Calcalypse says, "Ooh, I've heard of this. Looking forward to see what I think of it." Yeah, I've heard heard of it too. Obviously, as with all of these, this is a fresh read, fresh, new. I haven't pre-read it. Don't really know anything about it other than I don't know if this book. I think a lot of the books in the FKR space don't really call themselves FKR, but folks who are into the FKR have gathered them, I guess, as good I guess, rules or just good sources. And this was one that's pointed out to me. So I don't know that they're anywhere in the book they're going to say we're FKR, but that's in the context of which it was recommended to me. So that's why I kind of titled the video FKR. I'm not really sure how they would, if they would put it in a category. Do the authors consider this more OSR? It's just a thing. I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll get into it and then we can see where things go from there. But I thought I would just throw that out there. This is by James and Robin George. Old House Rules. So as normally with these things, so we got about 59 plus pages, probably at least 60, I guess, but not including whatever fronts pieces. I'm going to skip over the intro, but I do want to read the mechanic. And this, the reason why I know this is I did just flip through this very briefly as I was getting ready to stream. As I was really looking for something kind of to call out to it. And I think like a lot of the FKR games and things that we've covered, one of the things that seems to be common in sort of the FKR games is a single mechanic. In Kismet, right? It was that D20 roll using that Kismet number and kind of bouncing up and down there. That seems to be that kind of part of the simplification of mechanics that is popular in the FKR space is kind of relying on a single, simple mechanic. So let's see what does Mydwandr have up its sleeve. Anyone who knows how to make decisions in real life should know how to do so in a fantasy game. It all comes down to what a character knows and what shouldn't require anything more than the idea and the opportunity. All else, meaning those feats where success is uncertain, calls for 8 or more on 2 regular 6-sided dice. Okay, so right off the bat, we're getting kind of an apocalypse world type deal. I don't know. It's Apocalypse 8 or 9. I can't remember. Basically, 2d6 roll. You got to make 8. So your chances off the bat are a little bit less than 50%. And we could go to any dice, look at the odds, but I believe it is 7. 7 is basically average. So we're pushing it a little bit past, a little bit on below average chances of success. Combat, and basically anything dangerous and or difficult, requires these so-called doubles, noting that certain conditions can make the otherwise easy impossible. Okay, and I guess by doubles, maybe we're talking, rolling the same on both dice, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 5 and 5, that kind of thing. We'll see, I guess. Of course, certain characters and their many challengers may be talented in some particular area, performing at an advantage. Here, the player rolls 3 dice and picks the highest 2, greatly improving their prospects. This is called rolling triples. Oh, I see. Okay, so doubles just means 2 dice. This is called rolling triples, and it's the backbone of triumphant heroes and winning challengers alike. And while these are normally reserved for specific skills, the referee can award them in those situations where the characters have gained some leverage. So it's an advantage, right? If you're familiar coming from 5 years, I think 5th edition is the first game to use that advantage, probably under other names, but we know it as advantage, right? Instead of rolling in 5th edition sense, 1d20, you roll 2, take the better. If you got disadvantage, you roll 2 and take the worst. In this case, we're starting with 2 dice, and then we're going to add 1 and then take the better of the 3 dice. And again, I don't know enough about the odds of this stuff on any dice, but I think that's going to shift things pretty good. Probably is what brings that 8 down to probably better than 50% odds of success. So presumably you want to chase down those triples as often as you can. And this is just cold iced water for the working man. All of this encourages and rewards well-thought action because the first games were basically war games and remain so to some extent. Combat is central, but courage alone is little proof against powerful and or well-prepared foes, and careless choices are often the last. Death is an ever-present threat, by grievous battlefield injury or ill-conceived words in a tavern far from obvious danger. And again, so much of this results from routine cause and effect in a realistic campaign setting. Okay, so the important parts we got are mechanics. Super simple. It doesn't even look like, in a sense, there's any kind of altering of the target number, and I didn't even see disadvantage. So it might purely be, hey, you either just you have slightly below average chances to do something, or you're able to get that third die and then get above average chances to do something. Let's see. So the next section up is role play, which I'll probably read as well. But then, I'm not going to read everything. Unlike Muster, which I felt was super dense and really needed to read everything, I'm going to do more skimming. But I think we're getting the real core of the system. So I think it's important to get the whole thing here. Role play. Despite the popularity of fantasy gaming, some explanation for the uninitiated is called for. Okay. So maybe I will skip this one because I'm going to assume that if you're in here watching this, you probably don't need to explain to you what role play is. If you do need that explained, there are plenty of videos and other things to do that. But just for purposes of time, I'm going to skip. Hey, Magnus. Hey, Chaoclips. I'm glad you liked the Muster read-through. It took a lot out of me, but I think it was worthwhile. So next after roleplay is characters. I think this is just introducing the concept of characters. And then after that is kindreds. Many races inhabit Mydwandr, human, much like ourselves, and otherwise each having a selection of abilities. Hardy dwarves, nimble elves, and adventurous mortals share the setting spaces, and players choose the role they wish to assume. Okay. Sounds kind of vanilla fantasy, which I'm totally fine with. So you have dwarves that are hardy and stubborn, and industrious mountain dwellers fond of mining the earth and famously covetous of gold. So basically you're kind of Tolkienian dwarves, and they're 4 feet tall. Dwarves are brave and enterprising folk. That's great. Elves always represent the oldest sentient race in whatever worlds they occupy. Slender and basically man-sized. They're uncommonly beautiful with pointed ears. Indeed, they're so swift they react as if rolling an 8 for combat initiative, or the party's result when better. Breaking ties and moving stealthily in armor and shield as conditions otherwise permit. So kind of similar to Tolkien elves right there. They're quick, they're quiet. An elder bloodline, they're allegedly immortal, barring mischance, for they hail from undying lands. Elves are aloof, but wise on the whole. So yeah, so we're going totally kind of Tolkien standard elves here. And finally, humans are relative newcomers, youngest of the world's kindreds, larger and more reckless than their extraordinary counterparts. They add +5 to their hit points at first level and get 1 extra ability at character creation. Seems very much in line with the kind of thing that Wizards of the Coast did with 5th edition with the kind of variant human, right? We're not stout and tough and from our mountain fast like dwarves, and we're not light and swift and wise and practically speaking immortal like elves, but what we are is flexible, which relates to, and I guess hardy, because in this case we're getting +5 hit points. So we're in a way we're hardier than dwarves, even though they're stout. And then you get that extra perk of, hey, you get an extra ability at character creation. All right, so that's it for our our bit on the they call them kindreds, which I like that, good word. Now on to abilities. I just want to skim and see kind of what we're dealing with here. All right, so let's see. Well, so this is I was thinking this was going to be your attributes, but it doesn't seem like that's it. So it's maybe more something else. Anyway, what does it say? All characters can wear armor and shield and fight with an assortment of weaponry. So I don't know if this is, and then one of the things I don't know if this is classless. I haven't seen anything about classes. This seems to make it sound like it might be, but then I can see things that read like classes on the opposing page. So we'll have to see how they work together. But in any case, all characters can wear armor and shield and use a bunch of weapons. So there's no, at least whatever these classes or whatever they are, there's not a fighter versus mage thing where the mage or, that can wear nothing and the fighter can wear everything. It seems like everybody can pretty much wear at least the vast majority of stuff. Let's see. Indeed, this is an element of character creation granting strategic advantage against all manner of adversaries, but adventurers pick up other abilities, choosing 1 if non-human and 2 if human, noting that some are common, available to all, with triples reserved for those taking that ability, and others are special and exclusively available to those choosing a particular attribute. I see. So I'm not sure what that means. Well, okay, so we have some of these abilities are common, and that means they're available to all. I think that means that anybody can use that ability, but you only get triples if you have that ability specifically. So for example, just looking down here, we see archer. Okay, right? Archery. Common, meaning anybody can pick up a bow and shoot, but they're going to be rolling 2 dice. If you take the archer ability, you get 3 dice. So you get an advantage, but anybody can try it. We have another skill called acrobat that's specialized, meaning that you got to be trained in it to do it. You want to do a double flip gainer off the top rope. If you're an acrobat, you're good to go. If you don't, you don't even try it. It ain't even happening. And interesting here that it's basically that it's not even like a disadvantage type thing. It's just, nope, it's not on the table. I mean, and I presume if you were going to do something, you could just launch yourself in the air, but there's no way you're going to. No, it's not like you can't physically not jump off the top rope, but you're not doing all that stuff. You're just going to land and potentially break your neck, presumably. But it's an interesting way to, it feels a little bit, and reading these up, it reminds me of Barbarians of Lemuria that had kind of occupations. I'm not sure what they called it, but basically jobs, something similar. These read kind of like jobs or occupations. So you have acrobat, we got archer, we got backstabber, exorcist, footman. What is a footman in this case? Okay, a brawler. Okay, that's not. I think a footman is more like a butler, but sure. Healer, and then learned, which is basically is kind of like looks like an overarching sort of lore skill. These seem fairly general, so you could build up your own story around what it means to be a backstabber. It just means, in terms of the game, it just means, hey, you can move undetected from behind and you can strike for 3 damage. I don't know how much that is, since humans add 5 to their hit points, but they could do that. Other folks cannot do that. Does that mean you're an assassin or a thief? I don't know. Maybe not. It's kind of up to you. So it's an interesting mix, right? Because you have an exorcist that seems clearly like this is a thing that you do, whereas a backstabber could be something that you're just good at, I don't know, incidentally. And then we have healing, so you can get healer, and you can, again, we have learned. Calclip says, I like how this contributes to the milieu of the world with the exorcist ability. Yes, and I think, in terms of, obviously, I'm always keeping an eye out for, well, what if I don't love this world and I want to maybe use this kind of mechanically in my own system or in my own place? I always love these where these abilities are very simple and straightforward. So if I don't have exorcists, but I have something else, I can add that in. Or maybe I want to do it, have more thiefy kind of stuff, I can add that in. Now, I'm not seeing stuff like climb. Notice we're not getting a lot of the other things. So Backstabber says, if the character can move undetected, they automatically strike for 3 damage. It doesn't mean that nobody else can move silently, right? There's none of those. If we're looking at kind of, and the whole OD&D Greyhawk thief thing with taking what was at the time kind of common abilities and depending on how you read them, funneling them into a single class, we don't really have here. Those common abilities are common, meaning that even for the archery, they're not saying that you can't, only if you have the archery thing, right? You get that advantage. So it's a nice way of giving you a little bump by saying, hey, I'm going to specialize a little bit, but you're not taking it off the table for anybody else. But if you want some of these other ones, then you're going to have to really delve into. You want to be an exorcist and defeat undead, then you're going to have to take that. And it also is interesting because looking at the Kindreds, since humans get 2, they're kind of in an advantaged spot, which in a way almost simulates the layout of things in like OD&D or BX, right? Because if you're the dwarf, you can take one of those, but then you're kind of locked into that, and everything else you're kind of out, right? Where the human can take 2, so they could be, they could take the backstabber and acrobat, and they could really go for a kind of flippy thief. The elves and dwarves can't do that. They can either take acrobat if they want that, they can take the backstabber if they want that, but they can't get both. So it's sort of interesting what it means, how the kindreds and these things kind of work together a bit. Beardy Ben says a footman is an old word for an infantry soldier as well. Yes, that's true. Though it's the brawler part I think threw me off. If they said they were really good with swords or things like that, I would have been more like, okay, but yes, that is also accurate. And it's funny because I was actually just looking up footman because I wanted to use it for something that I'm working on, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't using it. I wasn't going to use it incorrectly, and it turns out I was, so I had to find another word. So it was fresh, top of mind, as they say. Calclip says they want their flippy thief dwarves jumping off of top ropes and stuff. Well, you can. They just can't backstab. They're going to have to hit them with hammers from the front. And we got some more stuff here. So light-footed. Oh, wait, did I miss something on learned? Okay, learned is just Right, they're just finishing up learned. So we have, light-footed, locksmith, mighty, an orator, a pickpocket, a pilgrim, pious, a spellbinder, which is basically your wizard type thing. So, a lot of stuff here. Interestingly enough, or I don't say interesting, but you look at this and go, okay, if I wanted to be a stereotypical cleric, English is a funny language. It can totally be, yeah. So I want to be a kind of a cleric, a sort of your standard cleric. So maybe I want to pick up, if I want to do that as a human, I can pick up pious, which I guess, let's see what pious reads. Is that basically divine spells? I'm not sure. So pious says, either through uttered prayers of sorcerer's incantation, the character may call upon some divine or demonic power to aid them. Okay, yes, that's definitely. So I want to take pious, but I can't be a true D&D style elf cleric. I can pick up pious, but I can't get that exorcist. So it's really interesting the way they divvy these up. Obviously, you want your kind of spell casting ones to be specialized because really, I say it's obvious, but it might not be. Really going to depend on the setting. Obviously, here they want them to be sort of special. So unless you're a human, you can't do more than one. Now, theoretically, it seems like there's nothing stopping you in this case from being both pious and a spellbinder. I don't know that anything that says you can't do that. So that's kind of interesting. The same thing with kind of your standard thief stuff. You can't get them all. Even I think as a human, you can't get them all. You can let's see, you can get pickpocket and backstabber. You can get acrobat and backstabber. You can get acrobat and pickpocket, but you can't get all three unless there's some way at later levels to pick up another specialty. But I guess what I like about this system is you could play with these, and if you're setting, you want different things to be common and other things to be somewhat locked, you can do that. But it works very easily. There's not a lot of really math to it, right? It's either you roll 2 dice, you roll 3 dice, or you can't roll at all, right? If you don't have a specialized skill, you can't roll it. If you don't have a common skill, you roll 2. If you have a common skill, you roll 3. And if you have the specialized, I guess you also roll 3, or is it 2? I would guess it's 3, but I don't know if I missed that because I was just wondering if it's specialized is the scale backed off 1. I'm not sure. So about magic, I guess I'll just read this. A wizard, the player, this is on Spellbinder. A wizard, the character can fashion a variety of magical effects, 1 per level per game day as a healer, but subject to different rules. Okay, so what's the healer? We didn't read the healer. I just kind of skipped over it. All right, so the healer says, through prayer and or magic, the character renews 10 lost hit points on a single injured companion, limited to 1 such healing per level per game day. This act requires a round of uninterrupted meditation, making it impractical during hostilities. Healers can likewise mend themselves, noting that rare non-players perform greater miracles for a tithe. Okay. So I think that what makes it, I'm guessing the same, is that you need to have a round of uninterrupted meditation and not a turn. So what are we talking with a round? Are we talking about a combat round? Or I'm guessing a combat round, or maybe not, because this makes it seem like maybe it's longer than that. It doesn't say you can't do it during hostilities, but impractical. So if you're wondering what I'm blabbering on about, in kind of your ye old OSR BX kind of rules, you have, I guess they're saying round. I think of round as combat. So that's usually 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever it is. And then a turn would be a full go round. Then you had an exploration turn, which was basically kind of when you're not in combat, that's 10 minutes. So you go from like 10 seconds to 10 minutes. I guess on a round, if we're using our generic sort of things, we're suggesting that's 1 in combat, right? Your turn, and then the next round, your turn again, which means that you could do it in combat, but you can't do anything else because you're concentrating. So that would, I guess, make it impractical. But they haven't gone over what the terms mean, so I can only assume that they mean kind of what we're used to them meaning. But I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's just what I'm going to go with. And then back to the spellbinding. So you can do a variety of effects, 1 per level per game day as a healer, or sorry, per game day, which is similar to a healer. I don't know if they need that, because I guess maybe just because it also needs a round. So we don't know what the magical effects are, but 1 per level per game day. So if you're first level, you get 1. Your second level, you get 2, so on and so forth. Calculip says, I suppose if you don't have the orator skill, you can still do it, but you actually have to convince the GM. Yeah, so, okay, let's look at the orator one, because that's an interesting it's one of those social skills. I'm not usually a big fan of the social skills because not because I want people to make big speeches, but I don't like that idea of we'll just roll the die. Like I want you to, if you're a player, if you're a player in my game, I don't need you to make a grand speech. What I need from you to have is to have an idea, a strategy of what you're trying to do. So, for example, if you had an audience with a local lord and you want the lord to give you some horses because you're in a hurry and you don't have any and you need to get across country and you need horses, and this local lord has horses, but you don't have the money to pay for them, or you're looking for horses that you can't even buy because they're the lord's and they're not for sale, whatever. You go and you get an audience with the lord. I want you as a player to have a game plan. Say, hey, okay, I'm going to go to this lord and I'm going to follow. I'm going to be very obsequious. I'm going to bow. I'm going to do all the things as best as I know how. And what I want to do is I'm trying to convince him to lend us these horses. And I'm going to point out that what we're doing is going to benefit him. He has orcs at the borders of his lands that are coming, and I am trying to get to somewhere else to get help to come back and essentially save him. So it's in his best interest, logically speaking, to help me. We will bring the horses back, or we will provide them with replacement horses, and we're trying to get there as fast as possible. So we mean to be back here. We're not abandoning them. And the sooner we can get help, the better off it is, because those orcs are on the march and they're going to be here very quickly, right? So that's my plan of attack. I'm going to convince them, hey, it's in your best interest. I am doing this for you, my lord. I just need some horses to do this thing for you. It's not for me. I'm not trying to take them and sell them on the black market, sell them on medieval fantasy eBay. I just need these horses to get there. That's kind of the thing I want, right? I don't need the exact speech. If you want to say, oh, great lord, and go into a whole thing, that's great. But what I'm looking for is that you have a game plan. And for me, that's the important thing is, okay, you've made this appeal essentially to this person's logic. And if they're a logical person, there's other things at stake. Maybe they hate you. And you as a player know they hate you, then maybe you need to say something else, like, listen, do this for me and I will ride off, fight the orcs, and I swear either I will die on the field, but either way I will never come back if you do this for me, right? That kind of thing. Just have a plan. I don't want that to come down to a roll. I don't want that to be like, oh, just let me roll my diplomacy, and then the roll does. Now I know you can use the rolls for various things. I don't have need of it myself, right? I don't really want it. Hey, Ian. So in the modern game, that's one of the things I just never really liked. I never really liked I'm going to roll for diplomacy, or I'm going to roll for those kind of things. Like if it's diplomacy, it's essentially logic. So this would be a diplomatic move. I'm going to tell you how this benefits you, and then you're going to weigh in your brain and see that, oh yeah, that like whatever I'm getting out of this deal is I'm getting a better, you as the lord are getting a better deal than I am as the supplicator. So I want to make that deal. That's kind of diplomacy. Again, I just don't think I need a roll for that. And if I'm trying to inject a little randomness in there, I've got things like reaction rolls and potentially things like a reputation or whatever to kind of set up. And of course, assuming this is an ongoing campaign, whatever else that these characters have done to put them in, oh yeah, the king loves this person like a second son, or hates him with the fire of 1,000 suns, and therefore it's really highly unlikely he gets anything but like a lame mule to ride out of town with. So let's see what their orator skill is. So in this case, this is a specialized skill. So you can't just use it if you don't have it. You got to have it. The speaker has a way with words, rolling doubles to convince others, provided communication is possible and the target is at least open to negotiation. Okay. So it's very vague, which I think is kind of going to be kind of, for all like rules light systems, right? They are intentionally vague. We're rules light. We're not trying to give you a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to leave it up to you. So we'd have to figure out, well, what does it mean convince? Does it mean I roll this and convince the lord to just give me horses for nothing? Probably not. What I read that to be is that you have someone who is at least open to negotiations. Maybe they hate you. You could bring in the orator. I imagine that kind of Gandalf going to see Denethor, right? And Denethor is very wary of Gandalf, kind of seems to have a dislike for him, distrust for him, but Gandalf can say enough things and do enough things so that Denethor kind of begrudgingly maybe will at least talk to Gandalf as opposed to not letting him in the gates, that kind of thing. So it's kind of at the edge of what I'm like, would I maybe take that one out? I'm not sure. I almost would. the way I might use that is actually that if you had the orator skill, that you could take someone who is not really open to negotiations and you could get them to that point, like almost like you could raise their reaction by a couple of pips. So if they came in hostile, but you're able to, in other words, you have the space to do it, it's not an ambush or something else where they're just going to attack you on sight, that you could kind of step up and say something and kind of push them towards not necessarily positive, but kind of neutral, but not wanting to kill you kind of thing. But there aren't a bunch of them. So, and again, I like that it's fairly broad. So how you use that orator skill is going to be up to you as a player. All right, so we get hit points. So you have 10. Humans get 15. They are lost in battle or from various hazards, and recover naturally at a rate of 10 per night of uninterrupted sleep. Should hits fall below 0, you die. Okay, so it doesn't say whether you get more of them over time. So you might just be at 10 or 15. And you get them back at 10 per night. That doesn't make that backstab seem that terrible, because if you have 10 and you're taking out 3, granted you don't want to get those 3 removed, but it's not even close to being an instant kill, unless there's something where kind of this is your adventurers and NPCs potentially, like guards and just normal folk will have much less. It seems like backstabbing is kind of nice, and clearly if you can get it, get it, but it's not a game changer. Calclip says, I notice it does not allow for triples whatsoever for orator. Also, as much as I dislike social skills for group games, I think stuff like order will be useful for solo. Yeah, solo, I think you have to, there's tons of caveats, right? If I'm playing solo, then certain things. And I can agree, because when you're playing solo, and I don't think that, and if someone knows, feel free to correct me. I don't think that these rules are written for solo play, but obviously with lots of stuff, people take and solo play off anything. I think when you're playing solo, a lot of these kind of mechanics, like social mechanics and other things, are good because you're trying to stay out of that GM thing, right? The last thing you're trying to do in a solo game is have that conversation with yourself. Aha, oh, that was a good idea. Oh, yes, I think so. So you're trying to kind of, you want to get rid of that. So you just want to kind of make your pitch, and then you're looking for that sort of, I'm not the GM. So either you're using an emulator to say, okay, you be the GM, or you could use this kind of skill, or both, right? You could have both. You could have the roll to see kind of if you're on the positive side or negative side, and then you could use an emulator. But yes, in terms of social play, it's a lot more. I would definitely be up to using it. So just on magic, which I forgot to kind of close out. So what does it say here? Okay, first, charms only affect a single target within 60 feet, creating a single effect, either scoring 5 hits of damage or manifesting some alternate outcome with spell duration in rounds decided by triples. Finally, the character forgoes armor and or shield use when acting in this capacity. Spellcraft involving mysterious somatic gestures. So you can wear all that stuff, but if you're going to be doing wizard stuff, you got to take it off, which is fair, I think. Players decide how their magic works, perhaps targeting the ground, making slippery to oncoming guards, or themselves becoming a bird, flying to freedom. Sorcery is limited only by the wizard's imagination, demanding greater creativity. All right, so I just want to backtrack on this. Okay, so you only get a single person charm, so you can't mass charm anybody. You can create a single effect, either scoring 5 hits of damage or manifesting some alternate outcome. And then you would roll triples to decide the duration. I just want to find out, when you're rolling these specialty ones, do you roll doubles or triples? Let's see. But eventually, okay, choosing one. Let's see. Okay, I think you're only rolling triples on the common ones, which is kind of my intuition. Or I did read it, but so I think you're only rolling 2 dice. So it's interesting here how they talk about. Well, okay, so one, you get spell duration in rounds decided by triples. So I guess you're going to roll. It's not. I'm guessing. So here's would be my guess. You're going to roll 3 dice, take the top 2, add them together, get the number of rounds, which seems to be we have this generic idea of a round. So I'm presuming that we're talking combat rounds. So whatever your 6 to 10 seconds, whatever it is, let's just call it 6 seconds until we hear it differently. So the most you're going to get is, right, the best you could roll in those triples would be 12, 2 6s, add them together, 12. So 12 times 6, so 72 seconds worth of spell. So I think given those limitations, the single effect, I think you can read kind of broadly because it's not lasting very long. So you're not polymorphing yourself into a dragon and then going berserk for a bunch of time. It seems like you're really, and I think you could probably also that I think the limiting factor is creating a single effect. So maybe you could turn yourself into a dragon and then you could maybe breathe fire or something, but you can only really do 5 hits of damage, so 5 points. So it can't be all that powerful. Or presumably, like in the example they show here with a bird flying to freedom, the effect you're doing is flight, and you're getting that flight by making yourself into a bird and flying, but it's only lasting for up to 12 rounds. But even that, right, would be, I don't know what the average would be, 7. So you'd have about 7 rounds times 6 seconds. So something, 42, something like that, 42 seconds of flight. So, impressive for getting yourself out of a jam really quick, but you're not flying across the world. Remember, you only get one spell per level per day. So at first level, that is your one spell. And you got it for about a minute. So I love the fact that it's kind of wide open in terms of you can, and if someone else wants to use flight, but use it for something else, that's probably good. I would imagine because it's one effect that if your idea was to become a bird so you can shimmy through the bars of your cell and then fly off, that wouldn't actually work, because you could imagine that becoming a bird and flying to freedom, you might become a bird, but you're a man-sized bird so that you're not shimmying through any bars. Or you become something small and wriggle out between the bars, but you're not getting both effects. I might like that you could scale up the effects over I might amend this so you could scale up multiple effects when you're at higher levels, maybe. But that seems to me, hopefully I'm catching what they're trying to give me here. It just says 1 per level per day with a single effect. Yeah, so I don't know if I do it every level, but interesting to look, and we'll see how kind of levels progress. But I'd be interested. I mean, I guess I should just play with this, try this as is, and see how it works, and then before I start tweaking it up. But I think that single effect is kind of key because it lets you do some really neat stuff, but you're not getting that much out of it. Turn to the dragon, but your dragon's doing one thing, right? Maybe that effect is just getting bigger, and you're going to kind of use it as almost an illusion. Maybe it's to bite somebody, but you can only do 5 hits of damage, so you can't really. If you're thinking you're going to kill somebody in a single hit with a dragon, that's not happening. Same thing with your fire breath. Or you could, if that was wanted to be your version of flying, you could turn to a dragon, but you'd be a man-sized dragon, so maybe more like a drake, and fly, and then fly off. All right, so we did the hit points. We got movement. This is a game of exploration, so movement matters. Unarmored characters move 50 feet per combat round. So here they use combat round. This is where I like to, if I had my way, I really like when you define stuff before you're going to use it, because we've been seeing round, and here we see combat round, and I don't know if they're supposed to be the same. Because maybe there's a different round. Because people will use these terms kind of interchangeably. So do they mean it's a 10-minute, like a exploration turn kind of round? Or are we talking combat rounds? So I almost would have rather they just put round, and at least I'd have it on the same, things would be on the same thing. But now I'm starting to, there's a little bit of doubt. Am I reading that other time frame? We'll see. I'm going to assume they're the same, but who knows? Suffering no limits to stealth and or thievery. Armored characters move 30 feet per round, sacrificing stealth for defense, a must in close combat. Indeed. So you have money and gear, which look, we have all this stuff. I don't need it. So here we're going to see what armor does, because we haven't seen that. We haven't seen armor class, anything like that yet. So armor grants saving dice against death. Should the wearer fall to 0 hits, excluding poisons, which are ingested, the character rolls saving dice, with success reverting them to 5 hit points in a heroic resurgence. The armor is damaged beyond further use, but it's a small price to pay. Magical armors display impressive craftsmanship, making repairs possible. Aha. So there's really only one armor. So on the one hand, if you like having your bevy of different armors, you ain't getting it. You either got armor or you don't. And if you got armor, I guess it's presumed to be somewhat heavy armor. And armor is not going to save you from taking damage, but it's going to give you a one-time roll to stay alive if you were otherwise to die. So it's kind of like a shields maybe sundered sort of thing, if you recall that house rule that a lot of folks have adopted. If you have a shield and you're going to get knocked out, you can sacrifice the shield. In this case, you're sacrificing the armor, but it's not a sure thing. You still have to roll your saving dice, which presumably is just going to be 2 dice. And is that, and I'm guessing that's still an 8, because I'm assuming that all rolls, right? We have one mechanic here, 2d6 got to beat 8. So I'm presuming with the saving dice, you're rolling 2d6. So you'd still have an under 50% chance. But of course, that's on top of the fact that otherwise you'd just be dead. So yeah, it's probably still good to have that extra chance to save versus nothing. And then as far as shields operate like armor, granting saving dice against frontal attacks where these can be deployed. This allows characters a second attempt should the first one fail, otherwise providing defense against future attacks, making armor and shield an unbeatable combination. So it's a fail-safe, but only from the front. So that gives you a little backstabby thing. If you can get that backstabby, or just, I guess, just be positioned in the rear of somebody, they can't use their shields to stop you. But if you have shield and armor, then it does give you 2 ways to save, presuming it's a frontal attack. Of course, armor is superior because even if you do get surprised, you still get that saving throw. Frontline combatants depend on them, noting that these can be raised against missiles when conditions otherwise permit. Magical shields like armors can be repaired, some conferring other special powers. So the other thing, if you end up getting a magical set, is you can fix them. So you can use them more than once, but we don't know exactly what fixing them entails. So probably that's still the end of that armor in terms of your current adventuring expedition. You'll presumably need to go back to town unless there's some kind of around the campfire with a little hammer and armor repair kit. You can kind of bang it back into shape. So bows have distance as their primary benefit, with range and other bonuses provided here. So you have crossbows, get +1 damage and have a longer range. And you just basically have, I don't even know why they put long or short bow, because it doesn't matter because they're the same. Let's see. And the difference for crossbows is they deal more damage, but they take longer to fire. And then we have, in terms of weapons, 2-handed weapons get +2 to damage, but you can't use shields, and you need extra space to wield. Interesting, the space thing, because I always like considering that stuff, but at the same time, when so much stuff is being, things like armor, right? We just have 1 armor. It's interesting to then think about having that space requirement. Just because it's an interesting balance, I guess, of we're abstracting away armor, but we're not abstracting away your 2-handed sword. So we're gonna figure out if you have enough space to wield it, which also means, I guess, if you're two-handing it, you can't be next to anybody, because you got to have, if you're in a 5-foot square, you got to have sort of 5 feet on either side to whip it around, or even longer, I suppose, or more space. I'll probably just rule it that you got to have a 5 foot around you, I guess. Cacalypse says, that's pretty cool. Reminds me of all weapons doing D6 and OD&D, so you can use whichever weapon. Yeah. I mean, yes. And the same thing here, right? Weapon, 1-handed, 2-handed, axes, spears, whatever, right? I guess I kind of like in, say, OD&D, because I mean, and when I play BX or when I run BX, I do the same thing, D6 for all weapons, but I do give them specificity. I don't know if I love just calling them like weapon. I mean, I'm not sure that's what they're doing. Let's see. Do we have here bow, crossbow? Yeah. See, I mean, and obviously we can do this in the game. I'm not really criticizing the rules for not having a bunch of weapons, but that was always something that, with my imagination, I remember as a kid looking at all the different pole arms, or all these different weapons. And it's just kind of fun, even if they all ultimately are somewhat cosmetic in that they're only doing D6 damage, or even when you have variable damage, you still find a bunch that do basically the same damage. But I just like having that, because they tell you things about the culture and just all sorts of things that you can pull into the game, which we have something that's just like, hey, I'm wielding weapon. But if I was playing this game, I would, in terms of what people are wearing, I would have different weapons there, but they would all basically boil down to these same stats. All right, so Encumbrance. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. You can have 25 additional items that are small enough, kind of belt stuff that's kind of dangling off, I guess, in easy sort of reach, and then 5,000 coins maximum. Jewelry is weightless, and that's about it. Character. So you basically can have a name, a kindred, abilities, hit points, movement, coin, and equipment. So you got a really nice little blurb there. So it doesn't look, so we haven't seen levels yet, because here it says, I don't see levels on this little character here mentioned, but we did see levels, right? Because magic, I did read that correctly, right? They did say magic 1 per level per game day. So there are levels somewhere, but we haven't run into them yet. Calclub says, space to wield seems an interesting added granularity. Yes, it does. It's just interesting, because we feel like we're going very abstract in some ways, but then we're measuring those 15-foot spaces. And even the other movement, 30 feet kind of thing. Like it seems like for something like this, I could see just going with fast and slow. You're either kind of, or maybe fast, normal, slow. Or you're kind of at normal. If you're wearing armor, you go down to slow. If you're, sort of things like that. But hey, I mean, it's interesting to think about because there's so many different ways we play games now. There's Theater of the Mind, folks. There's all the people playing on VTTs, and of course, people are post-COVID going back to playing, in person. So having the measures for some people is just going to be extra accounting that they don't want to do. Say for me, he's playing Theater of the Mind, and I'm not really trying to get into the 15 feet part. I would just kind of play with it. And of course, depending on your two-hander, I could see someone making the argument of like, but I'm thrusting forward and back. I'm not doing swings over my head like, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan with his, hand and a half or bastard sword, whatever it was. Like I've got a two-handed spear and I'm just pushing it back and forth. So, can I not do that because someone's standing next to me on the side, even though I'm just going stabby, so that, so it's interesting that they kind of take a moment to call that out, but then we just have weapon. It's all choices we make when we're kind of designing stuff. Okay, so now we get into time and place. So gameplay should feel freeform, especially the March of Time, which shouldn't be much different than a storybook where monotonous days in the barren waste require mere minutes to chronicle if nothing interesting happens. But time or lack thereof can introduce some narrative urgency, especially when retreating to town before darkness falls and ravening beasts appear. Out of combat, party movement is a collective effort with movement as follows, subject to the referee. So if you're, so basically just have some very simple, right? If you're outdoors, 12 miles per game day. This is reasonable. Underground, 500 feet per gameplay hour. So definitely quicker than your sort of the slow movement speeds of something like BX, but again, not unreasonable. And then mentioning here that you could have, exceptions. So this is your standard. I kind of like having the specificity of different terrains costing different amounts to move across because I like the choices that brings. So you have to decide, do I want to go quickly through maybe a more dangerous spot or slowly through a thing that I think is more safe? I like that stuff, but I've seen a lot of games just kind of give you like, hey, you're out. I think when we did Twilight 2000 from Free League, they just kind of had road and off-road. And they weren't really concerned with what kind of off-road that is. And I think that's fine, right? This is where, again, it's interesting because this for the rules, I get it, right? Just, hey, you're outside or you're inside. And, you can, if you want to make an exception where something that's particularly difficult, you can, but this is our basic. But then 15-foot radius for two-handers. So just interesting. 12 miles, Chicalp says, I wonder if they'll get into recommended hex sizes later. I don't think so. Probably not. But that's, if you're using 6-mile hexes, that's about 2 hexes per day. I think it's reasonable because I think, I don't know. I know some people have these really fast times, but I think when you're walking under load and no, we're not, I don't think of the adventurers as SEAL Team 6 members or folks who are just gone through crazy boot camps. People's pace is, for the most part, under load, carrying a bunch of stuff. Like I think of the adventures more like the Samwise Gamgee and Frodo kind of thing with packs and pots and pans banging off and all kinds of stuff, clitter clattering around, and they're not speed running through the woods. So for me, that kind of 18, 15, 12 miles per day, I think is fine. And especially since you're kind of hand waving it, so we can imagine this is we're not looking at, say, roads or plains, which would be faster, or then forests and hills and other things which would probably be slower. So you're kind of just saying, we're going to pick that middle. So I think picking that middle by saying, we're not giving you 18 miles a day, but we're also not giving you 6 miles a day. We're just going to give you 12. I think works best. But yeah, we have no particular scale. They may not be using hexes at all. This might be time and place might be the only parts of sort of wilderness travel we're getting. We'll see. I don't know. Okay, combat. So combat is divided into 30-second rounds. So at least we know how long a round is. 30-second rounds. Each side moves and acts, which can be either an attack or a spell, etc. Should ranges permit, and you roll against the following table. So if you roll 2 to 7, you miss, you whiff. If you roll 8 to 9, you do 1 damage. If you roll 10 or 11, you roll 2 damage. And if you roll if you roll 12, well, double sixes. If you roll 12, you get 3 damage. So in that case, the backstabbing is interesting because you do get max damage. That is max you're going to get. But I think the other thing is that you're looking at one-on-one 3 rounds of combat, or as presuming nobody's got some big plus whatever weapon. Because if you're going to do 10, you have 10 humans, actually even more. It's like 5 rounds of combat, which is kind of interesting. And that's assuming everyone's rolling max damage. Everybody's rolling max damage all the time. You're doing at least 5 rounds of combat to get to somebody going down, just because you have 15, 2 humans facing off, 15 hit points each. So that's an interesting approach. Getting the first attack is vital, and the referee can forego initiative when a wise group engineers conditions, perhaps setting lookouts to tip the scales. Elves are supernaturally fast, allowing for action even when careless planning or surprise disadvantages their oblivious companions. Of course, even that ancient race can get caught unawares. That said, referees, in deference to fairness and gameplay challenge, must demonstrate their willingness to reward a party's good strategies. Okay. Did I miss something about initiative? I probably did. What was that? When combatants meet and fighting becomes inevitable, everybody rolls doubles for initiative. Okay. I got you. So, yeah. And elves, remember, they get an 8. So, you can always take the 8. So, okay. So, now we have the encounter. Here we have, it looks like an example. Alvis turns a corner in the mines of Skalgop and faces an enormous Urku. His player rolls doubles, getting an 8, while the Urku rolls 7, meaning the dwarf holds initiative for whatever hostilities await, drawing his axe to do battle. All right. So, this is good. So we got getting an example combat. So this is round 1. Alvis is a footman, rolling triples for 2, 1, and 5, respectively. His highest 2 makes 7, failing to strike his foe. So I guess footman is melee weapons. For some reason, I read that as brawler. Okay, I just didn't read far enough. Okay, so it is really, so like was mentioned earlier, as footman as foot soldier, that's what it is. Okay, melee. I just saw brawler and I stopped. My mistake. My bad. Okay. So he's kind of melee focused, but still doesn't go. So now the Urku rolls a 9 and gives 1 hit point to the localist dwarf, bludgeoning with its club. So now that would presumably put the dwarf down to 9 hit points, down from 10. Round 2, the now wounded Alvis attempts a final blow, getting 11, 6, 3, and 5 for 2 hits against the Urku. His opponent had but a single hit point, falling to the triumphant dwarf, who can resume his expedition into Skalgop's catacombs. Okay, so all right, so that's interesting. I wasn't expecting the Urku, which I'm not sure. Maybe it's supposed to be like an orc, but only had 1 hit point. So that makes the 1, 2, or 3 feel a lot better. It's obviously, because I was looking at it like everybody had basically PC type hit points, but that's not the case. So presumably then, if I was asking about what about kind of normal folk, they probably have 1 hit point. If a mighty Urku only has 1 hit point, then Bob the farmer only has 1 hit point. Yeah, I might have given him 3, but I don't know what an Urku is. We don't know what it is yet. That's the one thing I would have liked was let us know what the Urku is, because it sounds really cool, but it's like 1 hit point. So it's really just raised to 1. I mean, in this case, the dwarf has a way big advantage, because how many times is that poor Urku going to have to hack down the dwarf, and the dwarf just hits him once. So, and next we have a note. Had Alvis fallen to 0 hits, he could have rolled saving dice against his armor to survive. Noting that some enemy monsters, including Urku, do likewise. Okay, but this Urku clearly did not have any armor. Fighting death, okay, including do likewise. Fighting to the death or surrendering, whichever course saves earns. Okay. Calclip says, I like how it specifically states enormous Urku, but then it has 1 hit point. Yeah. And that, that gets something, I mean, that's something that some people will love, right? This is sort of that, what was that story? The 7 hit point dragon is this massive dragon, just has 7 hit points kind of thing. It is kind of funny, right? So, it's mighty. What am I going to do? And I 2 hits, and He's gone. You know, it's fine. And the thing is, too, is there's no mitigating factor, right? This is not a case with a monster where you can say, well, yeah, the Urku's huge. Granted, only has 2 hit points, but it's got like a really tough armor class. So yeah, you only got to hit it once, but you're going to have to really hit it hard, right? We don't have that. You just have, because the odds are all just fixed. And so, hey, you're just rolling damage. So the only thing you could do would be to give the Urku armor, but even that is just a roll against a save. And then you can only do it once. I mean, obviously you could probably fudge things up, but clearly the goal here is to not, if you're coming at this as a referee GM, clearly the goal here is not to try to craft this particular encounter. You just throw stuff at them, because they're going to be, and I don't know if this is meant to be kind of heroic as opposed to 0 to hero, but clearly there are going to be things here that you're just this lone PC fighting a lone monster. I don't know how many monsters have 1 hit point versus 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, but clearly this guy's got 10 hit points. He's worth 10 of those Urkus, essentially. So that, you can just throw more Urkus at him, I guess. I don't know if they're going to give us any guidance. It'd be kind of interesting to hear the guidance, but it's just a choice that they made. So saving dice, like similar actions, saving dice requires an 8 or better. Yeah, I think I kind of picked that up. Oh, that's right. Chaos says, sorry, 15 if they weren't a dwarf. Right, so 10 hit points. But I did say 10 Urkus. The Urkus only got 1 hit point, but maybe there's variable Urkus. Maybe some Urkus have more hit points. Dwarves do get triples for all but death saves. Wait, what is that? Oh, all saving dice except for death saves. Dwarves get triple. Okay, that's cool. So we have sorcery here. Healing, piety, and spellbinding don't require doubles for sorcery and divine power or beyond mere works, but spellcraft is especially challenging. Either automatic hits, impervious to saving dice, or other unnamed effects the player must formulate extemporaneously. The latter can delay or distract enemies or produce some alternate outcome. Noting that teleportation magic is limited to 60 feet radius, 120 feet for wand. Cosmic level effects, however fleeting, are best denied as unstable. All right, it's a little bit unclear, but I really like the way that magic is really open and loose, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the not. I don't know what it means by saying it doesn't require doubles. I don't know. I don't know what that means. Because you're rolling 2 dice to do it. So I don't know what it means. It says don't requiring doubles, because they talk about doubles as kind of rolling 2 dice, but this makes me think something else. I'm not sure. But some things, let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they're trying to give you some guidelines for magic, but I confess, I'm not sure I understand them. So, but spellcraft is especially challenging. Either automatic hits or other unnamed effects the player must formulate extemporaneously. The latter, aka unnamed effects, can delay or distract enemies or produce some alternate outcome. But you can't really do much beyond 60-foot radius, at least for teleportation type stuff. I guess what it's trying to say is that, hey, you got to be wary, right? You're rolling those dice and it doesn't require anything special, but that you as the GM, it's challenging because players are going to come up with all kinds of stuff and you're going to have to kind of figure out where that sits. I actually thought the earlier example was better, though. Maybe we could get, that would have been nice to have, like, hey, we have this encounter example. A sorcerer example would have been also good. So let us know, like, as it is challenging. So give us like a challenging one and how you would work through that as the referee, like someone turning into the bird. Like, how does that conversation look like? Albus wants to turn into a bird. Okay, he's going to roll. All right, we say, okay, you can turn the bird, but you only get 1 effect. So what is that effect? Is it the size of the bird? Is it something like, what is that thing, right? What does that look like? That might be helpful to kind of figure out. But I think I got the gist of what they're saying, but it's maybe not as clear as I'd want to. But I think it's just an open system. So you're just gonna have to get comfortable with it, and hopefully your players and you are on the same page so that everyone can get comfortable, and so you can kind of just have a nice flow as opposed to fighting against, I don't want to say fighting, but where you can get into it where it becomes almost adversarial, where the player has expectations on one side and you have very different expectations, and they're not really meeting together. Calcalypse, maybe you don't have to roll. Maybe that's it. It could be it. I guess they don't require doubles. I guess, yeah, maybe that, I guess if I'm going to read it, yeah, that would mean you don't roll at all. There's no spell check, casting check. But yes, that makes sense, I guess, because they haven't said anywhere. You just get one pull level per day. So yeah, maybe I guess that would be the most obvious reading. Is you don't require doubles. You don't roll dice for this one, which is also kind of nice because it means you're automatically going to succeed in that limited one. But it probably could be. I think what's throwing me off is the use of the word doubles here, and it's not really their fault. They did set it up like, hey, you're doing doubles, or you're doing triples, but they have different connotations in my brain, so I'm sort of fighting against that with their usage. So I guess there was the only things that you're not rolling dice, because other acts right here, you got, if you need to check it out, you got to roll 2 dice. You need 8 or better. Okay, we have languages. That's great. Okay, so we have advancement. Adventuring is hazardous, but those who survive gain experience. Old House Rules says Cacolypse is correct about spells. Great, awesome to get that sorted out. Yeah, I think that was just me being a little bit boneheaded, because it does say rolling doubles. When I hear doubles, part of my brain just keeps wanting to think about like 3 and 3 or 4 and 4 and not 2 dice. I'll have to try to be better about keeping that in mind. All right, so now we have the advancement stuff. Okay, at the end of the session, each character on the following. So you complete a major quest, you get 2. You engage in hostilities, you get 1. You recover valuable treasure, you get 2. All right, so now on to maybe it's a little bit of what these mean. Quests should be rare events undertaken over several sessions with active roleplay and multiple deadly encounters to be overcome, a reward for enthusiastic role players, and an incentive to better participate in the referee's setting. So, an adventure, I guess, if you will. Combat, right? We know what combat is. Winning treasure is another thing we know. But I guess with a quest, maybe it's more, not just an adventure, like go to the cave and find the treasure. Like that wouldn't be a quest, but something, something more, I would guess maybe more formalized. For every 15 experience points, a character gains 1 level, adding new abilities and cumulative hits. All right, so you do gain some more hit points. And let's see, so you do gain more abilities. Okay, so as you go up levels, because we were saying before, it was interesting how the way they have some of these abilities lined up. Let's say you're kind of ye old cleric style abilities. You can't get them all on one hand, I think, or at least maybe humans could, at least in terms of if you took piety and exorcist, right? You could get both of those, or the thief ones where you could get kind of 2 out of the 3 that were sort of thiefy, but you couldn't get all of them. So now we know that, hey, that just means you just got to wait. You got to use your progression wisely to pick up some extra ones. Now on to hazards. Many dangers await an adventuring party, from monsters to mechanical traps to natural hazards, from wild animals to avalanches bringing certain death. These are detailed as follows, organized for convenience. So they have abilities. They've got a level. Enemies get 1 to 3 hit points per level assigned by the referee. Aha. So that Urku we met was like a level 1 Urku. So we can get more. So our Urkus can grow to become more formidable. That's excellent news. We get movement and then treasure, either animal hides or coinage, followed by the number indicating its monetary value. A few of these, like horses, aren't especially dangerous. Okay, I think we get it. So then we just have a bunch of these. I'm not going to read through all of these, but it's interesting that even things that are not technically, it's monsters, ape, but then also things like just obstacles. It's basically, well, like they say it, right? It's hazard. So it could be a creature, it could be a thing. So a hazard, avalanche, whether rock slides or snow barreling down a mountainside, these events cover enormous areas, delivering multiple dice of damage, usually 3 to 6, to those caught within their onslaught. These are normally triggered by some action, either noise in snowpack or disturbing the ground. And they don't have any, obviously there's no abilities listed with that, but I guess you're gonna roll 3d6, 3, 2, 6 dice. And is it Old House Rules? Thanks for joining, by the way. Is it when you're rolling dice like this for damage? Is it you're just rolling all the dice and adding them together, correct? Or are you taking the tops? And I mean, are you doing that kind of advantage, right? So if I'm rolling 6 dice, would that be 6 to 36 points of damage, or would it be just a better chance of getting 12? I'm guessing it's the former that you're rolling and summing all the dice. But if you're still here and you can tell me for sure, that would be awesome. And then I want to read what an Urku is if we got an Urku. We got demons, Draugr, dwarves, elves, Fey Dark, fungi. Got to have some ghouls, hags. Okay, it is. So for things like hazards like that, it is okay. It's you just summon them all up. Easy peasy. Good old Lich. Where are the Urku? I want to see what an Urku is. I want to know what Urku is. If he's a neighbor who wears suspenders, I'll be very, very perturbed. Let's see. Portals. I like that too. That, hey, hazard. Yep. It's an obstacle. Trap. Troll. Here we go. Urku. These humanoids are varied in appearance, ranging from merely brutish to the malformed, lurking in forgotten backwaters and marauding for the love of bloodshed and general misery. Indeed, they don't represent a true race at all, being automatons fashioned by some evil god and imbued with but a single perspective. So I like that because it's a nice little, hey, why are these guys always just doing, why are these guys always loving bloodshed and general misery? Well, it's because they're automatons. They cannot do better. Dwarves and elves have known them for millennia, fighting an endless battle, for upon death they reform in some terrible place and return to resume their mischief. Ooh, I like it. That'd be an interesting quest if you could find, or like an overall campaign, was if you could kind of figure out how to stop them from coming back. The Urku, that is. And then you have vampires. Unlike the mythical variety, these are giant bats given to hunting living prey, and with a monstrous 30-foot wingspan, this includes adventurers. On moonlit nights, they leave their caverns for the surface in search of food. Moreover, some liches use these as spies and couriers, doubtless accounting for the mythology around them, treating them like their other servitors and extending their power over the lands they rule. So they got some movement, they got a level, but they don't have any skills. Awesome. So I always like with these, such nice, simple, you can put them on a note card, right? These are really simple things. And if you didn't need, and if you as a GM were creating your own or whatever for your own game, right? You could even do without this stuff, the sort of flavor text, and just throw these things on it. But you could just kind of make a little note. So they're kind of really nice and succinct, but get you kind of what you need. All right, so we have some things here on balance. The referee should strive for a balanced game, although sometimes characters make their own fairness by avoiding these enemies beyond their abilities. Additionally, the referee can adjust numbers and or hit points to ensure parity. I think the one thing that'd be interesting is we don't have an idea of what balance looks like in terms of this game. Is it like OD&D or BX where balance is kind of like your dungeon level sort of thing? Is it, or are we expecting a 1-to-1? So yeah, one enemy per person, or maybe like hit points, like up to however, it'd be interesting. I guess I'd love to know, like, what, since we are looking, okay, a balanced game, like, what does that mean? Was that Urku, the encounter example of the dwarf and the Urku, was that balanced? One Urku versus the dwarf? Or like, what would that look like? Maybe we'll get more, but it'd be kind of interesting to see it, just to kind of know what the sort of authorial idea of balance looks like. Because if I'm bringing this in to use with BX, right, or old modules or something like that as my system, their concept of balance is obviously far different than maybe what this one means by balance. And so I'd want to know, well, what do I need to adjust? If I was going to keep on the Borderlands and run it with this system, what do I need to change on the keep to kind of bring it in line? All right, so the dark side. While miners are renowned, dwarves can't naturally see in the dark, originating above and relying on torches and lamps to lighten their domains. Other subterranean creatures, especially monsters aligned with the powers of evil, enjoy the ability to see in total darkness, including moonless nighttime conditions, giving them a clear advantage against adventuring parties from above. So we kind of have that, what the sort of fantastic underworld, what do they call it? Mythical underworld? Whatever, the underworld kind of thing where you can't see in the dark, but everything else kind of can, assuming they're aligned with evil. Miniatures. So, yep, you can use your minis. And, of course, they've got things like foot ranges if you want to use it. We have treasure. Riches are the primary aim of most adventurers who risk life and limb securing it. Sometimes this comes in the form of animal hides, which must be removed with difficulty. Oh, I see. So they're not, that's literally you're skinning them. Butchering carcasses and taking what time is needed. All else is coin or gems and jewelry of equivalent value, noting that the latter is weightless and may be carried on one's person. Whatever form it takes, treasure is assigned value on the following. So you either have So if you, it's a treasure type 1, you're going to roll 1 die times 10. If your treasure value is 2, you're going to roll doubles, right? 2 dice and go times 100. And you have a 1 in 6 chance of a magic item. And then if it's a, I guess, level 3, or I don't know, or treasure type 3, you're going to roll triples times 1,000, and there's a 50% chance of a magic item. Gems, it seems like, are really useful in this because you can have as many as you want. They're weightless, whereas coins are, have weight. So you want to get the gems and jewelry when you can. Okay, so we have some magic items. Where if you indicate, let's see, where indicated magic items are decided as follows, and you're just going to roll 2 dice. It can either be armor, miscellaneous, potions, rings, scrolls, staves, or wands, and then finally weapons being the rarest. Well, actually, weapons and armor are both the rarest at 2 and 12. Armor, and you're going to roll to see what kind of armor it is. It's either armor, a unique armor, a shield, or a unique shield. And I guess we'll see what. So non-unique armors, defensive nature, grant a bonus to the wearer's saving dice against death, and unlike their non-magical counterparts, are repaired at 10% of their given value. Process requiring 1 game week and a smithy. So yeah, you're only getting 1 on a given adventure, a given foray into a dungeon or dangerous place or just combat. You're still only getting 1 save, but you don't need to toss the armor. It's not destroyed. It's just you got to fix it, but it takes a week. So you got to kind of get a little bit of downtime, and then depending on what you roll, will have the value. So obviously, if you roll and you roll 11 or 12, you get an armor that's +3. But to repair it, you're going to cost you 300 coins per repair, if I'm reading that correctly. Unique armors get, let's see, so they include the following, although only full armors, not gauntlets, grant saving dice. Okay, so you get have potentially Dragon's Mail, Gauntlets of Power, which don't grant you saving dice, but presumably have some other effect, which we'll see. Hero's Plate, a Lookout's Helm, or Sorcerer's Leather. So Dragon's Mail is made from dragon scales. And wow, total protection from normal non-magical fire when you wear it. Gauntlets of Power, add a +1 to attempted feats of strength. Hero's Plate, if you save, when you successfully save against death, the wearer, you get 10 hit points back. So that's pretty darn cool. Lookout's Helm, the wearer you get more alertness, so you get +1 to their initiative and breaks ties. And then Sorcerer's Leathers, you can wear it and still cast spells. So super useful. And then shields, you can get a shield +1 or +2. And then we have some unique shields, the Shield of Berserking or a Worm's Scale shield. Terrence asks is the Sorcerer's Leathers made from real sorcerers? Only the finest sorcerers. Yes. Must be. Must be. I vote for that for sure. Let's see. Miscellaneous. All right. So then we just have a few different things. So it could be an Amulet of Insight, a Beast Cloak, a Bottomless Bag, a Crystal Ball, a Dwarf Hammer, Elven Boots, Elven Cloak, Enchanted Rope, Everfull Purse, or a Grimoire. Chaocalypse likes the simplification of armor, but then having unique types, that's cool. Yes, it is nice to have both, right? Because we've got kind of very generic, abstract armor, but then we can still have some cool stuff. And then it's really up to you and your players to figure out what form and design that armor takes. We're just not worried about it. It doesn't matter if it's scale mail made out of dragon scales or if it's plate mail, like it doesn't matter, right? And I can appreciate that. Though I still kind of like, just for myself, I kind of like having the different types, but I get it because there's a lot of what difference does it make kind of thing. Either one is just kind of better than the other, or they're kind of the same. So you go like, what does it matter? So I'm not going to read through all the miscellaneous items. We also have potions and rings, dark sight, defense, divination, free fall, illusions, light, mage sight, smiting, and wizardry. And you can get some staves and wands, also scrolls. But for staves and wands, could be an archmage's staff, a dowsing rod, a healer's crook, a magic wand, a protective stang, or the staff of rebuke. I rebuke you, sir. What does this protective stang do? Employed in demonic summoning, these are used to draw a magic circle around the character, thereby resisting attacks from such beings, so long as the wielder doesn't move and the circle remains otherwise intact. Oh, very cool. And then a staff of rebuke is a tool of exorcists. They force any undead within 30 feet of the character to save or flee by the swiftest route, affecting only those of lower level where applicable. All right, now we get weapons. So, you know, it's so here we do have some specificity, not just weapon, but we have arrows, axes, bows, daggers, hammers, maces, and swords. And then unique weapons, we've got the Holy Cudgel, a piercing blade, a soul stealer, and I gotta have the Vorpal sword. I just feel like that's a must. There's a section here on enchanting. For game purposes, magic items are created by non-player characters, wise dwarven blacksmiths, or elven magicians when not human craftsmen of great skill. Optionally, any character having both the learned and spellbinder abilities can write their own scrolls, a process requiring a full week and components valued at 250. I guess, was that silver pieces? So coins, basically. Moreover, these may brew potions at listed price, crafting one per game week in a laboratory. So you're not going to be making weapons and stuff, but you can create spells or scrolls and potions, which I think is fine. I always like, I think Holmes had some scroll crafting, and I think that is good. We have some stuff here on campaign. Starting campaign is a daunting task, especially early on. But all of this gets easier as the characters, through their gameplay choices, shape the narrative, forcing this imaginary world to respond to them. Very true. So we have some towns, and it's very abstract here, right? So you have what services are in towns, and they have a cost. And so you can spend a night in the stables for 1 coin. You can get room and board for 5 coins a week. If you want a bath with hot water, so maybe you can get a cold water bath for free, but hot water, I suppose that's just going to the river. If you want a hot water bath, it's also going to cost you a coin. So is laundry, and stabling, grooming your horses, also some. I like the point about laundry, and it's evocative in the sense that it leads you to think that maybe you could play around with the fact that if your players never wash their clothes, even if they are taking nice hot baths, that they're going to get pretty stinky pretty quick, and so they want to go meet with the Lord, and they're wearing these filthy, nasty clothes that they're not even going to get into the gate. And now we have some more in the wilderness. Chaocalypse was wondering about the wilderness, so here we go. The referee should place their new settlement on a larger wilderness map using hex paper, with 1 hex equaling 3 miles of imaginary landscape. So you're 12 miles per day, so we're talking about 4 hexes worth per day. Swampland or rough terrain, including local points of interest, should be included, with the latter being numbered and described separately. Characters entering a new hex have a 1 in 6 chance of a random encounter rolled on the following table, noting that referees are highly encouraged to make their own custom charts. So what's out there in the woods? It's a very simple list. So I would definitely want to go through and extend out this list. There's tons of resources with tons of wandering creature lists, but if you need one in a pinch, we've got bears, giants, lions, spiders, and wolves. Lions, giants, and bears. Oh my. Right. So pretty standard stuff, but yeah, please, I would definitely want to go through and just spread it out a bit. Give some more stuff. I don't think that they're all terrestrial. I'd like to get some flyers in there. Maybe throw a dragon in there on a really unlikely roll, like the 12. Spruce it up. But you got a list there. Dungeons. Certain hexes may contain the entrance to a dungeon, perhaps some forgotten sewer or subterranean cavern. These are mapped on graph paper, where 1 square equals 10 feet beneath the surface. Moreover, these should be internally consistent, whether Draugr in mausoleums or Urku in deep caverns, perhaps with slaves or guardians in their service. Important locations should be numbered and detailed on a separate written matrix with monsters and treasures to challenge the party. I would say all the locations should be numbered. Important locations should be detailed. Just number all your rooms and stuff, because you're going to confuse the heck out of yourself. Or the last thing is when they come into some area on your map and you don't remember what you were thinking and you didn't number it, so it literally is just a blank. Number it, I would say number it and give it a name, even if it's something like Cavern Alcove, or where they stored the pottery storage, garbage pit, like just something like that is enough, right? Of course, if it's important, then go into more detail, but at minimum, just number the rooms and give them some kind of name. The name could just be the purpose. The name could be, if it's something that lives there, it could be their name. Whatever it is, it could be a characteristic, right? Oh, what is this area? It's wet, it's damp, it smells, it's windy, whatever. Like the wilderness, random encounters are possible as monsters patrol the underworld. Here, the referee can designate certain areas, typically in its various passageways for random encounters, using letters E or R to indicate where such events might happen. Characters passing these have a 1 in 6 chance, subject to the referee, of encountering something rolling on the following chart, or using an original tailored to the dungeon's origin. These are more realistic, fostering immersion. Okay, so you're going to use an E or R. Wait a minute. For random encounters, using letters to indicate where such events might happen. E. Oh, is that? I don't know. What is E? Event or random? Is that what we're encounter or random? I'm not sure. Hey, Chris. Yeah, it is. It is very definitely cool. All right, so we just their generic wandering creature table. This is for the dungeon. It's Feydark, spiders, Urku, and vampires or vampires. I always like to. I don't know. I see that spelling. I like to go vampire instead of just vampire. I suppose they're functionally the same. Dungeons are normally dark, requiring a light source. These illuminate a 30-foot radius. And then we have traps. And let's see. And these require skilled locksmiths, although a willingness to ask questions from a strategist goes a long way to surviving its danger. So yeah, if you can work your way around it through fictional positioning, do that. And we got multiple levels. Now we get some tips on living worlds. And here we have the sample world of Mydwandr itself. The lands of Mydwandr were ancient before the elves came, being formed from some prehistoric volcanic events spanning millennia and thousands of miles. The noise of its birthing must have been immense, labor pains shooting ash into the air and forming mountains from the caldera's outer rim. Later, the ocean filled its great crater, leaving the Cinder Cone Island that later became Pallas, a land of powerful magic. The western lands are twin dragons, the eastern, Olandir, a land of spices. The scholar Dilo famously said that Mydwandr is a world dominated by its three great landmasses, and he was surely correct considering the centuries of bloodshed fought securing them for its line of kings. But first, about its many peoples. All right, so I get a nice little intro to Mydwandr. I like it's definitely the specificity and the knowledge about the tectonic events happening to create the landscape. So he's got kind of the main, sort of the larger continent, I guess. Continent, or maybe islands. I guess maybe they're not continent sized, but I'm not sure. Anyway, continent island on the left and right, and then you get this smaller island in the middle. I'm not going to go through all of this because the setting is interesting, and I would say if you end up picking this up, I think feel free. It seems like a lot to use it, but just because I'm already well over time, I'm going to just kind of briefly read through. We have some maps here. So we have first the kingdoms, of which there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kingdoms. And then we've got, what are these? Major towns? Major capitals? I'm not sure. Or are these places? What's 12? 12 is, I need my glasses for this. It's just small enough in the font. So that's 12. It's Gotswool. 13 is Atlatl. 14 is the plains of. So maybe these are just kind of locations, just general locations or areas, regions, maybe. Maybe region. That's probably the word. So we have Fjord up here in the north. And then what's that? 10 down there. Corfin down here. So yeah, I guess regions, or this whole area is Corfin. These are nice maps. Kind of simple, but they do the job for sure. And so we have some notes about humans and dwarves and the elves, and then the kingdoms, Cornith, Hyandar, Yontaver or Jontaver, Olandir, Palace, Ware, and finally the gods. Got to have some gods. And they're at the end of the book. Whoops. So there we have Mydwandr. I like a lot of what it's doing. I think whenever I'm talking to Daniel, mostly, right, he loves his varied mechanics. I have to say I'm kind of a fan of the simplified mechanics. I just think from if I was gonna print this out or bring it in and bring it to a gaming store, run a one shot or something, just being able to say like, hey, you're just gonna roll these 2 dice, and sometimes you roll 3 dice, but people are coming from 5th edition. I'm gonna say, hey, sometimes you get advantage, right? Sometimes you don't. You really want to look for 8s or more. And then, okay, and there's where there's slightly more context, I can give it to you. But to me, that's a lot just simpler than, hey, now you're going to be rolling this. Now you're going to be rolling this other one. Oh, you want to roll above? Nope, now you want to roll low. And I love that stuff. And I get it from just a pure nostalgia point of view. But I feel like that part of what, at least what I consider part of that kind of FKR, and I don't know if it really is, but what I consider part of the FKR is trying to keep it to as the minimal amount of mechanics as you can, and leveraging that minimum amount. Really, one, if I suppose, is what most people are getting to, and just leveraging it as much as you can. It just appeals to me. I know it loses. I think you could argue, as Daniel does often, that there's a lot of stuff that it kind of loses with that, but I like it. So I appreciate that a lot. I also really like the fact that the magic is very open-ended. I think I kind of wish it was a little bit more clear, or just give me some examples in terms of sort of how I'm supposed to be judging it. The little example of the bird probably wasn't enough, or at least I'd like a little bit more of the thought out, like, oh, he turned into a bird to escape to freedom. Okay, but was that the single, right? I think again, well, what does that single effect mean? I can kind of see it with the bird, right? You turn into a bird to fly away. So the single effect that you're doing is the flight part. But we don't know what kind of bird, like we don't know anything. So I don't know if there's also, like in my example, if you were in jail and there were bars and you turn into a bird, is the single effect turning into the bird? And so everything a bird can do being whatever bird, say a pigeon size, pigeon, everything, is that the single effect? Or is it like I was taking it that, okay, you can fly, but you don't get to do the other things? Like, I'd just like to know, like, what does that single effect kind of mean? Because it's going to be something that I feel like as a GM, I'm going to need to sort out, assuming I have a character who decides to play a sorcerer. But I can tell you that I would want to play a sorcerer in the system because I love that stuff. I loved it in Barbarians of Lemuria. And this is in some ways even simpler than that, in terms of Barbarians had more kind of steps and figuring out, okay, what circle am I doing, and this, that, and the other. And on one hand, I think that was good because it was going through those steps, make it very easy to come to an agreement more or less about what you can get for the cost. But this is kind of even simpler. I just would like some more examples. Okay, so old house rules coming in says whatever a bird can do. Okay, so that single effect is pretty powerful then. Obviously, the limiting factor is the amount of time you can do it, and the fact you get one a day. But yeah, some examples of that would be better. Like, and and for me, some of the things I would want to do is, I appreciate the use of just like armor and weapon. I'm gonna have axes and things, but that's a very easy thing. I can just go pull equipment. It's not really a big deal. I like the fact that just in terms of the templates for weapons, very simple, right? I think part of me, I'd have to shake out of one in that kind of light, medium, heavy sort of armor distinction. You just kind of have armor or you don't. Though I think for most games in reality, even though I kind of look at it myself and go, oh, I kind of like having those, I feel like it probably works really well in practice. I would bet that even though on the surface I'm like, I kind of like my light, medium armor, like the leathers versus chainmail versus plate mail. But the reality is that oftentimes it comes down to, yeah, kind of armor or you don't. And it's interesting, the handling of it is basically a save against death. You're not absorbing blows every round. You're just getting an extra save, which is super important. But at the same time, it's in some ways more situational because that armor is going to come into play once, right? Because either you save and then you're not dead, or you miss the save and you're dead. And then, that armor's thrown away and you got to go get another one, or maybe you have magic armor and you can repair it. So it's going to be like, it has like this really big impact, but only kind of one time, as opposed to, I think, what I'm used to, or what, and maybe if you're coming from a D&D-ish kind of background you're used to, whereas armor kind of is this constant safeguard. We're like, oh, I always got this little buffer because of armor. Here it's like, no, you don't. You're going to get a save. And if you make your save, you're good. But then, you're still, then your armor's done, or you're dead. So very, very, very interesting there. It's got a nice little setting if you want it. I really like the way you can put your character basically on a note card and go that route with you. I mean, I'm thinking of, as I do, I think about, well, what would I want to be adding in here? I'd want to delve more into the wilderness stuff. I didn't see anything about morale and reaction and things like that. It's easy to import. I presume the idea here is your referee will just be using their judgment, rolling doubles or triples or whatever they feel like is appropriate to figure out how positive or negative things are against you, and going through that. I do feel like this is probably aimed at folks with some experience. I don't know if I was handing this to somebody who didn't really know what a role-playing game was and that I would want to hand them this. That's not a knock on it. It's just that I think it's just, you have to, I think it is kind of expecting you to bring in some kind of foreknowledge of things to do with it, as opposed to being like, here. I'm not saying that you couldn't, But I think the game's going to look very different if this was someone's like first rules and they're kind of running it that way versus say someone like me coming from a bunch of outside stuff running. I guess that's true with everything. And maybe this, I mean, I do think it's very simple on the one hand, yeah, to get going, but I think it does benefit from having that kind of OSR, I feel like, mindset that not that you can't get it without experience, but it's kind of hard to know what it is if you haven't kind of tried stuff. Hey, Daniel says, the armor made of glass. No, the armor is not made of glass. It's made of whatever you want. They did have some cool, and I did like the magic stuff is pretty interesting because you have kind of generic armor, right? And then you had kind of generic magic armor, and then you had sort of unique armor. And I like that with the weapons too. There's a lot of good stuff in here. I think there's a lot of it. Daniel, I feel like you would find a lot of stuff of value, though I know you would be against the single mechanic. You're against me on the one mechanic to rule them all type bit. Definitely a lot to recommend in here in a small package. I think it's just, I didn't notice really any big typos or anything. I think the one thing for me is just remember when you're reading through this, when it's saying doubles, it's talking about rolling 2 6s and not looking at the values being doubles. There's just multiple times where I just had to kind of like correct myself or I misunderstood something because I kept wanting to look at that phrase and read it as something else. So, just got to make that switch. I think that you can import a lot of stuff. And I think for solo play, I think Calcalypse was talking about solo play. Then I think there's a lot of stuff in here for solo play that would be good. Daniel says breaking armor seems weird. Yeah, I get it. It is. This is one of those things. Like I don't know if it's less realistic or more realistic because I don't really know. I don't have a sense of how armor really operates. I could see the point of, okay, now you kind of got to fix it. It's losing effectiveness. But that's the kind of thing that I don't usually love it. I think I've mentioned before when I was playing through those Zelda games, when your stuff is breaking down, it feels like every 5 minutes, it just drove me bananas. But we also have this thing, in D&D where your stuff is essentially immune. It's like, it just lasts forever. Like your armor it's good forever. But for me, I don't usually think of something important enough to track, right? I don't know if I'd want a system where my armor is degrading just because I don't want to deal with it, and it doesn't seem like it's worth like it would have to be something really good that you're getting out of it. It's working. At least this is kind of simple. It's either on or it's off. I don't know. Maybe it'd be good to go down the rabbit hole of like when knights were in combat. How many combats could they just do their armor through before they needed to have it sent for repairs or upgrade? Like, what did it look like? What did armor maintenance when they're actually, you not just, okay, we're going to go to a joust or whatever, on crusade, let's say first crusade. How many armors did they carry with them? How often they need to repair? That'd be kind of cool to know. I don't know if at the end of it all, I would say like, oh yeah, so armor breaking is actually more realistic or it's not realistic at all. I'm not sure, but it'd be kind of cool to maybe I'll have to go down that rabbit hole and see, because it's kind of an interesting question. It's definitely a unique kind of take on armor. We've seen now with MCDM that they've got this thing with, and they're not the only ones to do it, but there's top of mind, right? Armor is essentially hit points, which is another interesting way to do it, which has a similar point of when you run out of hit points, you basically run your armor, you kind of drain your armor, but the next combat, it's not broken though, right? Whereas this case, it's your armor's busted. So it is interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure if I love it, but I feel like I'd want to play it first. I think I appreciate that it's a different take, a different style of doing armor. But I don't know if they're still here, but I want to definitely give thanks to Old House Rules for not ignoring me when I reached out and said, hey, would you mind sending me this so I can read on stream? So thanks to them for doing that. I will probably tag this as promotional just because obviously I asked for it. They didn't send it to me. And since I do this live and I do this totally unprepared, no one has any say over whatever I'm saying about this. Banditsky says, breaking a single hit feels odd, I should say. Well, each combat round is 30 seconds. So maybe, Daniel, you could look at each attack being a full, like, whap, 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 whap. We could pull up one of those videos where somebody, shows like, look, I can hit somebody 813 times in 6 seconds or something. One of those kind of silly bits. But things are kind of very abstract. So maybe it's just like the snaps are breaking, and the little, because it's not even like full plate armor. It's all these armored plates, but it's held together by leather straps and bolts and things like that. And maybe we're talking at it like in the game, what would it look like? Maybe it'd look at breakage. All those things are breaking down. The cudgel, the Urku's cudgel has knocked your breastplate loose, and now it's just kind of hanging, and it's it's pretty much done until you can take it back and get it rebolted or whatever you need to do. Right? There's probably ways you can make it make sense, but it's just interesting and sort of and different, I guess. And different is good sometimes. It's always nice to see new ideas. I would definitely put this on my list maybe sometime of trying it out with something, maybe doing a solo run, maybe getting some folks to try it, because I'd like to see how some of these things play out. I'm really, the magic, I'm really digging to see how that works. Like, would it feel kind of crazy? I'm guessing is it will make your wizard feel really good for about a minute, and then maybe they're going to be, but I guess they can always put their armor on because everybody can wear armor and weapon, use weapons. So your wizard can do something grand and then run back and hide behind the shield wall and put their armor on and pick up a weapon and go to work. So they're not, you're not super disadvantaged necessarily by by being a spellcaster. You have this kind of one great thing you can do, at least a level 1. Hunter says, one mechanic to rule them all. What do they miss? It's so Hunter, just to, I guess I'll just kind of wrap this up. So this was a system that, and old old house rules could clarify, but this was, so Mydwandr I'd gotten recommended a bunch of times when I started exploring FKR, and I don't, nowhere in this rules that I saw, right, did they say this is an FKR system. But I think I could see why, well, folks who are interested in the FKR culture of play would glom on to this, is because everything uses one mechanic. This is not that it's using Kismet's system, but similar to Kismet and some of these other games that are seen to be called out in the FKR space or highlighted through FKR channels is one mechanic. So in this case, it's a 2d6 roll. You have to roll 8 or more, basically, is where your positive results lie, and everything works that way. And if you have, say, as a character, you have an ability, you potentially roll 3 dice instead of 2, and it's basically rolling with advantage. So you would take highest 3 dice. So that is that's kind of the one mechanic that they're using, and they use it for everything. And I think it does an excellent job. I haven't gone on any dice and checked out all the odds and stuff, but I feel like that's pretty good. And it's, again, that kind of FK, very simple. It's just, okay, we're just going to roll this, and you're kind of rolling against the world, right? You're fighting a creature. The creature being a dragon or being a worm doesn't really enter into it. You're rolling against that flat number to see whether you succeed or not. I guess kind of powered by the apocalypse style, if you will, in that way. And then it comes down to whether, again, you have that advantage type feature, which gives you a little extra or not, and then just everything's working kind of off of that. But that is that. Chaocalypse says, even stuff for generating on villages and die drop battle maps and stuff, which is weird Warden solo supplement. I'll have to check that out. Weird Warden. I'll just pop this so folks can. Whoops, I hit the wrong one. Oh, there it is. So Chaocalypse mentions weird. I always goof on that one. Warden solo supplement looks like a lot. Oh, cool. So yeah, so there might be more here. I feel like for solo play, this could be a really helpful to people. And if, like I said, folks are trying to do something a little bit different, try the single mechanic and give it a run, I think this does a really good job. And there's lots of room to kind of add your own thing to it, which I think is kind of, at least I feel like this rules light systems are so powerful, because you just get that chassis and then you can add on as much stuff as you want. Yep, Bandits Keep Daniel says, yeah, it feels like Powered by the Apocalypse, extra dice versus bonuses. Sounds fun to try. Yep, I think there's a lot of interesting things you have to dig in more. And Old House Rules finally says, many thanks for taking the time to do this, and to those who dropped in to listen as well. Great gaming to all. Indeed. And with that, I am late, kind of. And I must depart, but have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. I will talk to you later. Bye now.